Ladies and gentlemen, this speech has gone viral across Africa and for good reason. When former President John Dramani Mahama took the stage at the 13th African Union High-Level Dialogue in July 2025, what he said next shocked the continent. In just a few devastating minutes, he exposed systemic inequality, called out governments, donors, and elites, and demanded acceleration from empty rhetoric to reparative justice. This is more than a speech, it's a rallying cry, and it's shaking the very foundations of African diplomacy. Let's set the scene. The 13th AU High-Level Dialogue, held on July 29, 2025, in Accra, Ghana, convened African heads of state, civil society, regional bodies and thousands of delegates to debate justice, rights, reparations and state building. The stakes were high. The continent is reeling from climate disasters, food insecurity, a youth unemployment crisis, and the legacy of historical injustice. This wasn't just another meeting, it was a crossroads. John Mahama, now a respected elder statesman, rose to the podium. He spoke not as a retired president, but as a voice of Africa's conscience. And what he delivered wasn't a polished diplomatic pleasantry, it was a thunderclap. He began by acknowledging the symbolism the African Union has relied on for years. Ceremonies, declarations, lofty vision documents. But then came the pivot. We have convened. We have declared. We have passed resolutions. And yet the poorest among us still suffer. The room fell quiet. You could feel the shift. This was not going to be business as usual. Mahama challenged the O and its members to go beyond symbolism. He said that unless Africa moved toward concrete, measurable reparative justice, the annual dialogues would become obsolete rituals. The audience leaned in. Even seasoned diplomats were caught off guard. Here was someone calling out the performative aspects of African governance in front of the very people responsible. He moved to the subject of colonial legacy and structural debt. Mahama didn't mince words. He explained how Africa is still operating within frameworks designed during and after colonization, systems that benefit global capital but disempower African states. That is not just financial, it is moral, he declared, and it must be wiped off the backs of the people who never borrowed it. This line would be quoted across the continent within hours. He emphasized how Africa's natural wealth, minerals, oil, timber continues to enrich others. Corporations extract value and leave behind degraded land, displaced communities, and broken promises. Mahama demanded a new reparative framework, debt cancellation, sovereign control over resources, and compensation mechanisms for environmental and human exploitation. He then turned the spotlight on African women. The applause returned as he said, "African women have held up this continent from liberation struggles to feeding nations, yet they remain on the margins of land ownership, political decision-making, and economic opportunity. Reparations," he said, "must include gender reconciliation funds. Any African reparative justice framework," he insisted, "must be intersectional, recognizing that justice for women is central to justice for all." But perhaps his most poignant moment came when speaking of youth. More than 60% of Africa's population is under 25, and yet young people are excluded from policymaking. Mahama didn't just mention youth, he centered them. "Youth are not our future, they are our present," he said. He demanded that policies, national budgets, and political institutions be shaped with youth in the room, not after decisions have been made. Mahama's approach to rights wasn't abstract. He tied them directly to state capacity. He argued that rights without strong, accountable institutions were fragile, that without transparent judicial systems, inclusive planning, and anti-corruption enforcement, even the best human rights language is meaningless. Rights must be guaranteed by the strength of the state, not the goodwill of leaders, he said. What made the speech electrifying wasn't just the content, it was the delivery. He started softly, methodically. He built momentum with stories. He spoke of his mother's village, which lost access to clean water due to illegal mining. He shared the story of a youth activist who had been detained for criticizing a local mayor. He connected personal narratives with policy demands. By the time he reached the heart of his speech, the audience was fully with him. "Justice isn't charity," he said, "it's owed." He paused, then added, and justice delayed, especially in Africa's justice denied. These were not new phrases, but in this setting, with this weight, they rang like thunder. As he concluded, Mahama presented a clear proposal. He called on the O to adopt a reparations action plan. This included national truth and reconciliation commissions, reparative fund contributions from former colonial powers, environmental damage assessments, and gender equity programs. It was ambitious, specific, and actionable. The reaction was immediate. Journalists called the speech historic, a turning point for African self-determination. Read one headline: civil society organizations praised the clarity and courage. Social media lit up with clips and commentary. Hashtags like #JusticeNow and #MAHAMA Speaks began trending across the continent, but not everyone was pleased. Behind closed doors, some leaders were said to be uneasy. An anonymous diplomat reportedly said, "Mahama spoke truths many of us aren't ready to confront." Several politicians avoided reporters after the event. There were murmurs that his speech had overstepped, and yet it sparked action. In Kenya, civil society groups issued a statement urging their president to support a Pan-African reparations framework. In Nigeria, students held a solidarity rally. In Ghana, activists launched the #ActNowJustice campaign. Calls for public accountability, inclusive governance, and reparations intensified across multiple countries. There were also serious responses. A few weeks later, the O Commission announced it would draft a preliminary roadmap for reparative justice. While details remain scarce, insiders say Mahama's speech was the catalyst. What made this moment unique was not that Mahama said anything radically new. It was that he said it in front of the entire African political establishment with clarity, without fear, and with purpose. He shattered the usual polite tone of O summits and replaced it with urgency. His call for a reparations plan wasn't about revenge. It was about dignity, about repairing centuries of dispossession, displacement, and disenfranchisement, and doing so in a way that builds stronger African states, not weaker dependencies. As Mahama said, "We cannot build peace on top of silence. We cannot build democracy on top of denial. And we cannot build justice unless we first acknowledge what has been broken." The speech, in its boldness and honesty, offers a new template for African leadership, one rooted not in slogans, but in substance, not in performance, but in policy. It is now up to African leaders, those in power today, to decide whether they will heed this call, because this moment may not come again. And as Mahama warned, history is watching us, and it will not be kind to cowards. This was more than just a speech. It was a challenge, a reckoning, and a path forward. The question is, who will walk it?